There are two kinds of people in this world. The people who fail to do what they know they should, and those who keep doing things they know they shouldn't. Guess what? You're both. Hi, I'm your host, life and business coach, Marcy Barker, aka your loving kick in the pants. In this podcast, I'll teach you the 6 steps of my accountability code that will help you wake up with clarity and show up with aligned action steps that make follow through easy and peaceful. All right, let's jump in.
Hello, my beautiful people. I am really excited for this episode today because this is not the typical "you're loving kick in the pants" episode. I mean, I guess at the very end, you can decide if it is or not. But by the time you're listening to this, I will have announced some really, really big changes in my business. So you guys have probably heard me say that I run a group called Lady Bosses, and it used to be called Lady Bosses of Utah. It actually got started by a friend of mine, and when the group was 3 days old, she was like, help me blow this group up. And so I did. And that's what I've been working on for a very long time, 3.5 years, coming up on 4 years now. So Lady Bosses has been a huge part of my life and my business. And the community that I've built has been very beneficial, not just to me, but to thousands of women. And it's gone through a couple of transitions, but nothing like what's happening now. So I'm really excited about it. So a little bit of backstory, because I didn't start the group, I wasn't in love with the name Lady Bosses because when I was 20 years old, I sold Mary Kay and people would respond to my messages and call me their Mary Kay lady. And I was like, I am 20. I'm not really a lady. Also, when I joined the group Lady Bosses, there's a huge company run by who was a fitness influencer, and it's called Lady Boss. And it's fitness stuff. And the company is now owned by Russell Brunson because this girl did millions and millions of dollars with her funnels using ClickFunnels. And so Lady Bosses is actually a huge company and it's all trademarked and everything. And as I was growing Lady Bosses, I was like, this is kind of not good that we're growing something that somebody else has trademarked. And we've had a couple of people rip us off. Like our logos looked very, very similar, some group in Seattle. And I thought that was kind of silly. But it was just another wake up call that it was like, okay, we have to change this because number one, the term lady boss is just so common and a lot of people use it. But most importantly, it's trademarked. And here's one crazy thing. So when I wrote my book, The Accountability Code, I was sitting in Guatemala trying to figure out what I should title my book. And I really loved the title I had decided on a long time ago. And my book was supposed to be titled Stunning Awareness, which meant that you have an experience that shakes you or wakes you up so much that it like stuns you, where you have to take a step back and say, what just happened? And that moment of awareness is something that is so powerful that you have this new knowledge where you're like, I have no choice but to show up differently because of this experience that I felt. And so when I'm talking about how to describe accountability, it's like you have to decide something and then you have to actually do it with your physical body. So wake up and show up is very reflective or descriptive of what accountability is. And my mentor was like, stunning awareness. He's like, nobody's going to resonate with that. And I was like, okay, well, you're the expert and I'm going to trust you. And so we were in the living room in this house in Guatemala and just figuring out different things. And we came up with the name, The Accountability Code. And big mistake on my part, and I feel like my mentor's part, was we failed to check if there were other books that were also titled The Accountability Code. And my mentor was like, it doesn't matter anyway, because books cannot be trademarked unless it's a series like Harry Potter or Fablehaven or 50 Shades of Grey or something. I think that has a couple of books in a series now. So I came out with the accountability code and everything was great. And then a couple of years later, I get a letter from a lawyer, from an attorney that is like, hey, you own the domain theaccountabilitycode.com and you are infringing on our trademark and we want you to give us that website because it was ours. And I was like, okay, not gonna lie, I got a little scared because I was like, my entire business is built around my book and my framework of the accountability code. And even though my book title can't be trademarked, there's still a framework and a coaching program that goes along with it. And this attorney was like, you're infringing on our trademark, you're using this. And I honestly was like, there are some days in business where you have this experience where you're like, okay, I'm done. I quit. I guess I'll just go get a job because I don't like this feeling like somebody threatening to sue you if you don't do exactly what they say. And I just also was like, this book has brought me so much goodness, but man, getting that book out and published, the entire experience of everything that I went through, it was the hardest thing I've ever been through. And so the thought of saying, okay, you have to shut it down because of somebody else, it was really, really hard for me. So what I did is I started talking to a ton of lawyers and I was like, hey, I got this letter and they want me to give them their website and they say that I'm confusing their market and all of this stuff. And luckily, every single lawyer I talked to, they were like, tell them to shove it up their A because you're not confusing anybody. They did the research. This person who owns the trademark hasn't done anything with it in a very long time. We're in different countries, even. And my mentor was like, if you have the same book title as somebody else, it doesn't matter. It just matters who markets it the most. And so they also were like, the attorneys were like, this is just their attempt to try and get you to give them the domain name because chances are they wanted to pick it up and start using the book again. And they just couldn't get the domain and they came after you because they saw that it was taken. A lot of the lawyers were like, hey, you can just, give it to them, get them off your back. Or some people were like, sell it, but don't sell it for less than 20 grand. And honestly, when I got the letter, I was like, the accountabilitycode.com, I don't even think I own that. And I typed it in and I was like, oh, yeah, I do. I totally do. I did my book launch with that specific domain, which is a really smart thing to do. But the lawyers were also saying the fact that the domain name was available and it had been available for a couple of years, that just goes to show they weren't actively using it.
Hey listeners, the message of waking up and showing up is yours for the taking. In fact, it's free. I've recorded my entire audiobook and I'd love for you to consume it between episodes. Head to marcybarker.com to get instant access to the accountability code Wake Up and Show Up. All right, let's jump back in.
I'm sharing all of this because you have days in business where you're like, I'm going to quit. And I guess I just have to give up and I have to figure out something different because this is a hard thing to deal with. I don't want to put in, 10 to 20 or $20,000 more, of work to protect something. And even when it's like, should I have named my book that in the first place? So as I went through this whole experience and I'm continuing to grow this group, I'm nervous. I'm very nervous because, people are ripping it off, but also it's like the legit owner of Lady Boss could definitely come at me the exact same way and say, hey, you're using our name and it's trademarked and you're not allowed to anymore. So you got to shut it down. I knew that in order for me to continue building what I was building with Lady Bosses, that I had to change. And I've known this for a really long time. We're talking like probably coming up on 2 years where I had the conversation with the other people who were helping me run the group. And I just said, hey, this has to change because it's actually not a very smart way to run business and grow business, knowing that you're infringing on somebody else's trademark. And if it gets big enough for the owner of the trademark to come at you, it's like, do you really want to have to pivot everything that you've built, knowing full well that you're building a name that means something completely different and it's owned by somebody else? So I've just had this really heavy feeling on my heart for a really long time. And the other people I was working with, didn't really agree with me in wanting to change stuff. But I was like, I am doing 99% of the work here. And so it's not something I'm willing to give up on or walk away from. So Aubrey and I, my husband, we put a lot of thought into how this change is really necessary. But if we didn't do it, how many women would suffer from losing this community because it not being run in a very organized way? And so I'm really, really excited to announce that we're changing Lady Bosses completely. And what I'm really excited about is our new name is something that I have the trademark on, which means that nobody ever can say, hey, you're using our thing, you need to shut it down. But it's also 100% more reflective of the community that we've built. And I'm really excited. So I've gotten a ton of stuff done in the back end already, but when you are listening to this, chances are the Facebook group has been renamed and the big name is Bossminded, which I'm really, really excited about. Boss minded means to take full control of what you're building. It means making the choices that you know you need to make. It means not apologizing for doing what you know you need to do. And most importantly, being boss minded means that you are creating the life and the business that you want. So I really, really like this because the reason that Lady Bosses has grown into something so successful is because of the women who show up and they are boss minded. They don't lurk in the corners, they don't hang out, they're not scared to grow, but they're the women who show up and they say, "Hey, I'm showing up because I'm building something and it's important to me." And coming back to the term lady just seems like people pleaser to me. It seems like, oh, I'm not going to say it if it makes anybody mad, or I'm not going to go to the front of the line even though I'm starving. I'll just let everybody else do it. And I'm so ready to get rid of that. I'm so ready to get rid of that attitude, to get rid of that demeanor, because I can tell you another thing that made me really branch off, I would say, or grow faster is that when you are the leader of a community and people don't like what you're doing, you are immediately the target of all of the backlash. There were at times problems where, people would kind of attack the admin team, specifically me, because I'm the one that is putting my foot down on how things need to go. And there was one time that we had a really poor situation. Somebody said some really hurtful things to me, and I didn't even know this person that well. And she made a comment that was just really demeaning. And I messaged her afterwards and I said, "Hey, I'm not sure what that was all about. It makes me believe you have a problem with me, but I am unaware of it. So if we can chat about it, we need to. But the way you behaved is not okay in this community that we're building. And we don't have events for other women to tear each other down." At the time, I talked to the admin team and I said, "Hey, so and so said this really rude thing, and you other admin were there. We need to address this." And all the other admin members were like, "I'm not going to say anything. I don't want to ruffle any feathers," or like, "I'm going to leave it to you." And at that point, I said, "Hey, if you guys are not going to address this with me, I'll walk away if we don't do anything about it." And I realized that even if I walked away, I had to have this conversation with this woman because it wasn't right for her to say the things that she did. And luckily, we had a very productive conversation. We saw eye to eye and we came to a resolution. And I thought, you know what? This community that I'm putting my blood, sweat, and tears into is really worth it. And I just know that I really can't count on certain people to back me up or to grow this community in a way that keeps it really strong. So over the years, actually, it's coming up on a couple of years, I've just gotten to the point where I've realized that in order for something to be productive and effective and impactful for a large amount of people, it has to be very organized and has to be very deliberate. And changing the name and changing the way the business is being run, I cannot tell you how liberating it is, because I'm finally doing something that is 100% protected. And as a life and business coach, it's actually really interesting because these are one of the lessons you learn when you don't quit, when you decide that you're going to keep going no matter the challenges that pop up. And there's one of my favorite quotes that says, "If you quit now, someone else will have to painfully learn what you already know." And I just think about all the challenges that I've dealt with in business, people ripping me off, or really close partners not backing me up, or getting lawyers or letters from lawyers that, kind of threaten everything you're doing. These are very hard things to deal with. And it's kind of the scary side of business that a lot of people don't talk about. And in the boss minded community, I want it to be a place where people not only talk about the hard things, but they conquer them, they overcome them, and they have people who will back them up. They have people who understand them, and they have people who recognize that in order for any business to be successful and sustainable, you have to have the hard conversations and you have to do the hard things, and you have to be boss minded about every single thing that you're creating. I am ecstatic that it's time to announce all the changes because there's so many more things that are coming with this new name and this new mindset. And I'm going to announce it all. It's all coming very, very soon. So I wanted to share a little bit of the backstory because at the end of the day, running a business is hard and it can be challenging when you don't have the answers or you don't have people you can look up to, or the worst, when you don't have people who back you up. It's very, very challenging. And so this community is something that I've put so much time into building because it's a safe place for people to grow and to learn. but it's for people who are serious. It's for people who are not quitters. It's for people who really have a dream to build something and they do what it takes to get there. So here's to Bossminded. We're going to have retreats. We have events coming up. The new website, bossminded.com. You can check it out in probably a week or so. I have almost everything put together, so I'm really excited about it. But if you haven't yet, join the Facebook group. So it is called Bossminded, and it's a safe community for female founders to grow together. So I'm really, really excited about it. I'm glad I got this out. I'm getting over being sick. And so I'm trying to talk slow because I'm fighting a cough. But I'm really excited for all the changes that are happening. And if you're listening to this podcast, I just want to personally thank you for your support. You know, growing business and sharing your message is not always easy. But when you have people who know you're impacting in a positive way, that's such a great anchor to hold on to. And I'm grateful for all the people in my space, my community, who are that for me, because I'm able to keep going because I know that it helps you move forward just a little bit more, a little bit quicker, a little bit smarter. And so I am super honored to be your loving kick in the pants. And I'm grateful to have an even more deliberate space to help you become more boss-minded. So I will see you all next week for another episode of Your Loving Kick in the Pants.
Hey friends, I want to thank you for listening to this episode of Your Loving Kick in the Pants. If you got any value out of this episode, I would love for you to drop me a review or share with a friend what you learned. All right, I'll see you next Wednesday for Your Loving Kick in the Pants.